Hello from Blooming, Indiana. My name is Peter Van Loosen. I'm a graduate student in Instructional Systems Technology at Indiana University, and next to me is
Curt Bonk from Indiana University. Welcome, University of Manchester students in George's Digital Technologies class, and I appreciate the questions you've sent us, and Peter's going to ask them, and I will try to answer a few of them. We'll see if we succeed here today. Peter's just back from a 12-hour journey from Charleston, South Carolina, back here to Bloomington, Indiana, and I'm trying to wake him up. Okay, Peter, let's go.
That's all right. Let's see if I do a good job here. All right. So please excuse my accent. That happens sometimes. All right. How does the We All Learn provide the marginalized communities to avoid multiplying the effects of the digital divide?
Well, University of Manchester students, you sent me a whole series of questions on this issue, as you saw, Peter, on this digital divide issue. And it's not a simple answer as one might imagine. You know, in the book, The World is Open, I cover a bit about the fact that we really don't need internet connection to address this digital divide. All you need is access to technology to download contents onto a CD. And in fact, you don't even need that. All you need to be is in a community that has an organization that is impacted by the internet in some way. So for instance, people in rural Western China can have people sending money to them, as in the 1 kg project or the 1 kilogram more project, where people go online to sign up to do something and to help kids out in Western China, and they travel there with 1 kilogram of stuff in their backpacks and stuff, and they have this 1 kilogram of stuff they bring with, they give to the kids, but it's really not what they give, it's the fact that they show up. And the fact that they're sharing with these kids information and make a connection and give them possible jobs and careers. So there's a case in point where one doesn't need internet connection per se to be impacted by the internet. The kids in the 1 kg project or in the Room to Read project in Nepal and Thailand, where John Wood and others are creating schools and libraries, getting funded by people around the world who donate time, money, and other talents to, in effect, bring books to kids who didn't have books previously. And they might not have internet connections at all, but again, the internet, the web, is a vehicle for providing the resources to make that happen. Now, another question on the same area came in, Peter, about whether or not I'm interested in adults as well as young kids in terms of this world is open and the digital divide issues. And of course, I think as we extend our lifespans, as we continue to churn into new economies with new skills that we really can't predict what's going to happen next, we need to keep reskilling people. We need to find ways, whether it be with technology or not, or face to face. And right now, I guess what I'm pointing out is that there are opportunities with free ebooks, with mobile technologies, so that we can have half of the world that has, you know, the 3-4 billion people out there that have mobile devices, to have education maybe programmed within it, so that we can have people learning through online technologies. And today, someone from Sega Ghana, who 2 years ago didn't have running water, didn't have electricity, is emailing me today, who's created a school, and he wants to take online classes so he can become a better teacher, better principal, better superintendent. To me, things have snowballed, if you will. And so while 2 years ago, maybe, 10% of the world had broadband internet access, and I'm not sure the exact numbers, I just threw that one out there, but it's increasing. And the more it increases, the more we move from just 5% of people in Africa with internet connections and 15% in Asia to move that to 10 or 20 or 30%. We're going to see significant changes. Also, when we see $10 laptop computers, which MIT is proposing, when we see flash memory sticks coming out with terabytes of data that cost minimal amounts of money, then it's not about storage capacity, it's not about the hardware per se, it's about the contents. And I guess my book, The World is Open, is about the contents and the piping and the participatory learning culture that today provides opportunities for all people to learn, no matter what country you're in, no matter what age you are, no matter what gender, what nationality, what race. Nobody knows, if there's a kangaroo on the other end, nobody knows who that learner is on the other end. In fact, we're just making learning available to all people. And it's a wonderful time, the fact that that's possible today. And in the past, we typically looked at correspondence courses and radio and television as the vehicles for distance learning and distributed learning. Today, the web provides that radio, provides that television, but it provides a lot more. It provides some basic contents, talking head stuff, like this that you're watching here, but it also provides interactive content. So, so the Web 2.0 gets at that, and I talk about that. So this is a great question about digital divide. There are many answers to it. And let me just point out one last thing to say. I'm going back to Korea in a couple of months, and I haven't been there in 4 years. When I was there 4 years ago, I spoke at the Educational Broadcasting Service, and the first question they had for me was about the digital divide.
Okay.
And keep in mind, Korea is the most wired country in the world, and they're concerned about the digital divide there. So I don't think this digital divide issue is going to go away anytime soon. I do think that the internet and the web does provide opportunities for more people than ever before, and we have to start thinking about what are those opportunities and to start thinking about how to best take advantage of them. And yes, there are corrupt governments, as one of the questions pointed out, that if we send money to, won't spend it wisely. But if we make books available free online, we can kind of circumvent those corrupt governments if we make contents like this one and post it up online, free online. I'm not saying this is high quality or anything. That's another issue of quality, which I don't think is one of your questions. So let's go on to question 2, Peter.
All right, question number 2. It's regarding assessment, and the students ask, what is the future of assessment in the scenario of personalized open learning? If I learn things which my teacher is not expert on, who is going to assess me? So, and do you think that e-learning could potentially bring an end to formal assessment? Good question.
It's a very good question. In fact, I used to give talks on e-learning, on assessment, and evaluation all the time back in 2000, 2001, 2002, till about 2003. And this was a common issue along with plagiarism. And other key portfolios was also part of those questions back then. And for a while, nobody was asking about this assessment issue for about 4 years. And in the past 5 months, I've had this question probably more so than I've had since 2002 or 2003. And I wonder whether it's the fact that today we have some stability in some of the contents that are out there that we didn't have previously, or the fact that we have more programs available today than we had previously, and the fact that we have more free stuff, and it's more evident that there is a lot of content. And it is becoming more interactive now. Maybe people are starting to put that focus back onto assessment. So I did a session for Wiley Publishing about 2 months ago on assessment and best practices. And it was in Saudi Arabia last month, as you know, or about, it was last month, where I talked about assessment as one of my final talks there. And I've also given it that same talk on assessment in other places during the past month. So it seems like it's raised in elevation of importance. So let's repeat that question again, because that's kind of a precursor to that. So personalized learning was part of that, right?
Yeah. If I learn things which my teacher is not expert on, who is going to assess me? What's the future of assessment?
Okay.
Do you think maybe that's something when you have problem-based learning comes along, and we have, I know that in our local high school, New Tech, that we have often experts come in from outside of the school, and they become a panel of experts who give assessment. Do you see something like this as a future solution maybe to this problem?
You know what's, I think, going to happen when we have all sorts of free stuff available online, and we're going to have more self-paced materials that we go through and then meet back with our facilitator, counselor, mentor, tutors at key points, touch points, where we get evaluated as to what we've learned along that way. But we also have peer groups we also have experts that can evaluate our performances, our productions, our products, our problems that we solved. So there are a number of ways in which experts, yes, can play a role. I think the teacher role will be fragmented in some ways, so that we do have teachers that do teach, directly instruct, others that create programs, still others that mentor and facilitate, and still others that help us create programs, and yet others that will be guides for life. And it's this role of the super e-mentor or super coach that I point out at the end of my book. People who understand content, people who understand human learning and development principles and human growth, and people who understand the internet as a vehicle for fostering one's life journey, not just the internet, but other ways. So, yeah, I think teachers still will play a role in assessment in traditional face-to-face classes where they do exist, as well as in blended ones. As you move into blended and fully online, experts will play more and more of a role. Practitioners will play, and there are many people in the real world, practitioners who want to teach college, who want to teach high school, who just want to be teachers but didn't have time in the past. And I see the internet today as a vehicle to bring those practitioners back in, to give them that chance to, and assessment's going to be a part of that place. In addition to that, of course, we're going to have artificially intelligent assessments, which we've been talking about for decades. And by the way, in which I lost most of my funding for graduate school and investing in artificial intelligence companies way back in the 80s when I was entering graduate school because of corruption. But I think we have some things happening today in terms of intelligent agents that will help in assessment, not do the assessment, help in assessment. Tutors that will help in assessment. Individuals, self-assessment. Peers assessment. So I think there's going to be multiple aspects to assessment. Will that, in effect, toss out traditional degrees and so forth? I don't think so, but what I think we're missing, and as I got asked this question by people at the e-learning guild last week, they did a podcast for my presentation next week in Orlando. They asked me about assessment. And my answer to them was that with all this free content available today, there's going to be a large segment of the population that uses the contents for personal growth, that I think we're going to have to start thinking about, or stop thinking just about contents for education that are assessed by a university, assessed by a grade school or primary school or a corporation, but that there's some people that just go to the MIT contents available online to learn something. And they'll be happy with that learning, and they're going to be on their own learning journeys, their personalized learning, as the question points out. And so my point is that perhaps we're going to see a swinging to that. 80% of learning is informal anyways, but let's say that 90% of learning at some point is going to be self-paced on your own, and 10% of it's going to be within a formalized structure. And that 10% is a pretty large amount of stuff. I'm saying this 90% is going to be billions and billions and billions of hours of personalized learning journey that's going to take place without assessment, or the assessments that take place will be crowdsourced in a way. They'll be decided by the community, what good the quality of that content is, number one, who's using that content. So I think we're going to have different perspectives on what assessment really is. Formalized assessment will still exist for traditional classes. There's no mistake there. I mean, it will exist, and probably to more of a degree than today. I read a number yesterday that said, Peter, they're going to double the number of students in higher education by 2020 to 200 million students from 100 million today. That's the numbers being cited. I mean, China's gone from less than 10 million students 5 to 10 years ago to over 30 million today. So just in China alone, we've had 20 million new students. So if we add 20 more million from India and add another 20 more million from China and so forth, and go in Brazil and other places around the world that hasn't had, we're going to see, in fact, I'll answer your question, we're going to see more assessments formalized, probably twice as much as we do today, but we're going to see 100 times more informal learning and self-paced and on your own learning than what we see today. I guess what I'm saying is that learning is going to be part of who we are. Learning is going to be the most important thing of who we are. Not the corporation that you work for, not the university that you work for, not the government that you work for. Maybe the church you go to is more important, okay? Maybe the family you go home to at night is more important. But in the general scheme of a handful of things that are most important in life, part of the most important thing in life is going to be your own personalized learning journeys. And this world becoming open for learning is going to, I guess, make that more salient. So maybe I haven't answered your question directly, or maybe I have. But let's go on to question 3, Peter.
Actually, you touched on question 3 already a little bit, because it addresses teachers' roles. And one student asked, what is the role of the teacher in this new transformative environment? What is a facilitator?
Right.
Yeah, so we talked about this. And then a second student asked, that you predict that there will be e-mentors and coaches in the future. Does it mean that the role of the teacher will change and the new role will become to show students how to reach these facilities and leave them, students, alone to learn themselves rather than the teacher teaching the subject?
The British model where you are, and I did get a chance to visit the UK like 10 times over 3 years, and I'd never been before in my life, and I haven't been back in 2.5 years, so I think they've kicked me out, so that was my window. The British model does a lot of tutoring and mentoring, and the role of the instructor is different than the role of the instructor here in the US, and a PhD degree in the UK is different than a PhD degree here in the US. I think the teacher of today, the teacher of 10 years ago, the teacher of 20 years ago will be different than the teacher of 10 years from now. I do think that as we walk into classrooms, in particular I'm thinking primary classrooms, kids are going to be walking in, and if their teacher's absent or at a conference or even not, you're going to have a window selection of different teachers you can pick and choose from that day, maybe somebody from the Philippines or somebody from Singapore or India or other places in the UK or the USA or Canada. So you're going to have more choice in teachers, number one. And teachers are going to be pervasive. I mean, when there's I think a Chinese saying, something, whenever one needs to learn, a teacher will appear. And this is going to be much more evident today as well as in the future as we look to bring in mentors and tutors online, which will change the teacher's role somewhat, because he or she will be aware of the fact that there are others that can take his or her place rather quickly, and so what skills is he providing or she providing that someone from Philippines or India or China cannot. As I said, I think the teacher's role is going to be more varied, and I think some are going to be instructional designers, creating contents and looking at quality, being the quality evaluators. Some will be career counselors, and especially as a teacher's been in the occupation for a while, that might be a more elevated role to be a career counselor. Some might be facilitators or moderators in that online environment. I got to watch which fingers. I'm just holding up one there. Some might try and do the traditional, lecture-based direct instruction, might be really good at that, and that might be their primary role. Others might be supervisors for all these teachers and do PD, professional development, for the teachers. Actually, I mapped this out, and I think 2000 I gave a talk on 7 roles for instructors. And actually, in teaching online, there are 4 hats. There's a pedagogical hat. Make sure it's interactive and collaborative. There's a managerial hat. Again, watch out the fingers. Make sure people are, on task and understand what's coming due in the assignments. And there's a social hat to get students to know each other. And then there's a technological hat to make sure things are working. In online environments, there's at least those 4 roles. And actually, others point out that there are dozens such roles. And I guess as we move to almost every class being blended in some ways, that means every one of those roles that are online are going to have to be assumed by the teacher in some ways. So in addition to the traditional lecture stand-up delivery, we have much more planning emphasis with an online class, much more focus on planning and moderating and facilitating that class. The roles spread out. There's more front-end loading in an online class, and there's, in a traditional class, it's just delivered and you're gone and then assessed. With an online one, there's much more front end. You might actually be able to walk away and go to a conference while it's being held and come back and handle it because it's all front end loaded. So yeah, I agree that things are changing quite a bit, and that we have to maybe think about multiple career paths for teachers even.
So very diverse and break it down.
Yeah, I think so, at least for now. And I do think that there are some teachers who are better than others and have the sense of human caring, that are going to be able to serve as developmental stage counselors, if you will.
Okay.
In the past, in India you called them gurus, but again, as learning becomes pervasive, as religion, and maybe it is a religion for some people, it is for me, then we need these gurus who can help people move through the possible learning epochs that they have, or stages, or whatever.
Want to move on?
Sure.
To question number 4, and
Sure.
this is regarding learner motivation. And the question is that, come on, we're all highly motivated students. Intrinsic motivation is generally a good key to personal success in education or work.
It is!
Well, it's clear that there are many who support distance learning in order for courses to be successful. Distance learner providers may need to focus on narrow audience of mature, motivated students. All right. Sorry, I didn't read the question before, and you can definitely see that. Despite the best intention to maximize formal distance learning opportunities for all ages and learners, does this only work best when the target audience is a narrow social demographic?
Let's be motivated, everybody! Yeah! All right! Well,
Tough question.
this is a tough question, so I'm trying to give you a little song and dance wrapped around it here and to get you off focus here of this really difficult question of whether or not when we're trying to address learner needs, whether we should focus on a narrow band of mature pre-motivated learners. I have a book that came out, I'm not sure if George has it or shared it with you, called Empowering Online Learning, and the model is called R2D2, Read, Reflect, Display, and Do. And that model really gets at diverse learners and what we can do in terms of reading, reflecting, displaying, and doing, and visualizing learning, and so forth. The follow-up to that book is going to be on motivation online. And so I'm in the midst of, I've written articles on it, but I'm just finishing a couple other books, but that'll be the next one I work on this summer, and it's a model called Tech Variety, where every letter stands for a motivational principle. So tone, encouragement, curiosity, variety, autonomy, relevance, interactivity, engagement, tension, and yielding products. Each one of those is a motivational principle, and I'll have 10 activities wrapped around each of the 10, or another 100 idea book, just like R2D2. And I think that you're right that online learning tends to address highly motivated adult learners, typically who need a career, to seek a career change, might need new skills to maintain their jobs, especially in this global economic crisis that we have today. But I think that if the tech variety model is implemented, if I think R2D2 maybe in addition to that is implemented, I think that we'll be addressing some younger learners as well, because they try and tap into the Gen X, Gen Y, millennial student at least perceived need for being technology rich in a classroom and being more interactive in a classroom setting. So I think the models help people make sense of what's available online, because there is so much that one can do. And in addition to that, these two particular models really try and get at addressing diverse learner needs and trying to get all learners, whether from a rich environment or poor environment, whether they're older or younger, male or female, or different cultures of the world, to get them interested in their own learning as well as the learning of others. And so I don't think it's impossible to have multiple sectors in the same class. In fact, I would encourage it. You can take the easy way out and only address adult learners who are ages 30 to 40, but is that really easy? Because some of these baby boom generations in their 40s or 50s are maybe technology phobic. So the assumption is, yeah, they might be highly motivated, but it's not going to be easy anyways, no matter what audience or population you have. I don't think it's that much more challenging having younger learners, and there might be ways to match people up, pair them up, get them to interact, and have the younger learners help the more experienced older learners learn the technologies, or vice versa. And so I think Tech Variety becomes one model for doing that. Do we have any other questions on the list, Peter?
Not right now.
Well, let's just make sure that we've answered this one here for these folks. Intrinsic motivation. Successful learners. I think, like assessment, let me just point out that motivation seems to be the other topic that keeps coming up over and over. In fact, my publisher said that the one book that the people are asking for is something on motivation today, that it seems like it's the number one question, especially if you look in the U.S. here with the huge dropout rates we have in high school and early college experiences. I'm sure the same is true in other parts of the world, but we have a huge crisis in our high schools, and online environments are not easy ones to teach in, so therefore we see this played out there as well. And there's a huge need today for a book related to motivation online. Well, I hope I've answered questions for students at the University of Manchester in the digital technologies, communication, and education areas. By all means, send me questions that I didn't answer here today. I'll forward them to Peter. I'll get Peter to answer them, since he knows a lot more than I do, and he'll be awake. He hasn't slept in a couple of days, having driven back from South Carolina in a conference called SITE. I'll be at a sister conference to that called Educational Media in Hawaii in June. If any of you are going, be sure to send me an email, and I can answer your questions there, or come to my session on the world being open. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we want to wish good luck to all the Manchester soccer teams this weekend, right?
That's right. Man United, go.
Or Manchester City, depends on where you go.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
See ya. No Arsenal.